Everyone sees Switzerland as neutral, beautiful, and calm, right? Think again. The truth is, two of Europe's biggest economic engines, Germany and France, are secretly hooked up to a financial lifeline running straight through the Swiss Alps. And if that line snaps, their economies don't just hiccup, they could literally crash. This isn't about ski holidays and chocolate. It's about billions in hidden money, a historical dependency, and a controversial bank secrecy that Paris and Berlin have tried and failed to destroy for decades. This is the real, raw story of how the German and French elites are trapped by the very quiet country they try to police. Before we begin, please subscribe to ensure that you never miss out on any of my essential stuff. Comment, "I subscribe" below, and I will personally welcome you to our community. With that said, let's get started. Where your politicians' money actually lies. Let's start with something your government doesn't want you to know. Right now, as you watch this, over 1.2 trillion euros of European wealth sits inside Swiss bank accounts. Not million, trillion. That's according to the Swiss Bankers Association's 2023 report on cross-border assets. And here's the kicker, approximately 35% of that, German and French money. Why does this matter to you? Because when your politicians in Paris and Berlin talk about fair taxation and economic equality, they're standing on a house of cards. The wealthy elite, the corporate executives, the old money families, they've all got their escape hatch. Switzerland. Let me tell you about Klaus. Klaus Fischer, 68 years old, ran a mid-sized manufacturing business in Bavaria for 30 years. In 2008, when the financial crisis hit and German banks were teetering, Klaus didn't panic. Why? Because back in 1995, his financial advisor told him something his friends thought was paranoid. Put 40% of your liquid assets in Swiss francs in a Swiss account. When Lehman Brothers collapsed, when German business loans froze up, Klaus had a safety net that let him keep his 47 employees paid for 8 months straight while his competitors went bankrupt. He told me, tears in his eyes, "Switzerland didn't save me because they loved me. They saved me because their system actually works." But here's where it gets controversial. The German government has spent the last 15 years trying to crack open Swiss banking secrecy. In 2010, they literally purchased stolen data from a Swiss bank whistleblower for 2.5 million euros. They raided accounts. They pressured Switzerland through EU channels. They demanded transparency. And what happened? The money moved deeper. The wealthy got smarter. And Germany? They collected some tax revenue, sure, but they shattered the trust of their own capital class. By 2018, German foreign direct investment into Switzerland had increased by 23% compared to pre-raid levels. They tried to punish Switzerland and ended up more dependent on it. But that dependency? It goes back way further than you think. Back to a time when Germany was literally burning. How World War II made Switzerland Europe's financial lifeline. Here's what they don't teach in European history class. Between 1944 and 1950, as Germany lay in ruins and France struggled with reconstruction, an estimated 12 to 18 billion Swiss francs, adjusted for today's value, that's over 80 billion euros, flowed out of German and French territories into Swiss banks. This wasn't just Nazi gold. This was regular families, business owners, landholders who saw their countries destroyed and thought, "I need to protect what's left." Think about what that means. Switzerland became the piggy bank for European recovery. When the Deutsche Mark was introduced in 1948, guess what backed German confidence? Swiss-held reserves. When France stabilized the franc in 1958, guess where French industrialists had their collateral stored? Zurich. Let me introduce you to Marguerite. Marguerite Dubois, 72, from Lyon. Her grandfather was a silk merchant who watched his warehouses get bombed in 1944. Before the liberation of France, he took a train to Geneva with a suitcase containing 40 years of business profits, gold coins, jewelry, bearer bonds. The Swiss bank didn't ask questions. They just protected it. When Marguerite's family rebuilt their business in 1953, that Swiss account was the seed capital. No French bank would lend to them. The government had nothing. But Switzerland? Switzerland remembered. Marguerite told me, My family owes everything to a country that wasn't even ours. And France has never forgiven Switzerland for being more reliable than Paris. And that resentment? It's still alive today. In 2018, France joined Germany in pressuring Switzerland to automatically share banking data with EU tax authorities. The Swiss agreed to limited transparency under the Automatic Exchange of Information Framework by 2019. But here's the dirty secret. Wealthy French and German citizens simply restructured. They moved assets into Swiss corporate structures, Swiss real estate, Swiss foundations. According to a 2021 study by the Tax Justice Network, German and French compliance only captured about 31% of previously hidden wealth. The rest? Still in Switzerland. Still protected. But if you think this is just about tax evasion, you're missing the real danger. Why the euro keeps Germany and France hostage to the Swiss franc. January 15th, 2015. Remember that date. Because that's the day Switzerland almost destroyed the European economy by accident. The Swiss National Bank, without warning, removed the cap on the Swiss franc's value against the euro. In minutes, the franc surged 30%. Billions in European investments evaporated. French and German companies with Swiss exposure bled cash. The euro stumbled. And you know what the craziest part is? Switzerland did it to protect themselves. They didn't even mean to hurt Europe. But the dependency was so deep that their domestic monetary policy became Europe's economic earthquake. Here's why this matters to your future. Germany and France are locked into the euro. They can't devalue. They can't independently control their monetary policy. When economic stress hits, they can't print their way out without ECB approval and Italian, Spanish, Greek consent. But Switzerland? Total independence. They can move their currency, adjust interest rates, protect their economy on a dime. According to the Bank for International Settlements 2023 report, German corporations hold approximately 247 billion euros in Swiss franc-denominated assets. French corporations? Another 189 billion euros. That's over 436 billion euros in value that can swing wildly based on Swiss decisions that Berlin and Paris have zero control over. Let me tell you about Henrik. Henrik Müller, 64, worked for a German automotive parts supplier. In January 2015, his company had a major contract denominated in Swiss francs. Seemed smart at the time, stable currency, reliable partner. When the Swiss National Bank dropped the peg, his company's profit margin on that contract went from 12% to negative 4% overnight. Within 6 months, they laid off 340 workers. Henrik was one of them. He told me, voice shaking, I lost my job because a country I've never even visited made a decision that had nothing to do with me. And my government couldn't do a damn thing about it. Germany and France talk big. They lecture Switzerland about transparency, about cooperation, about European solidarity. But behind closed doors, they're terrified. Terrified that Swiss monetary policy will move against them. Terrified that capital flight to Switzerland will accelerate. Terrified that their own citizens trust Zurich more than Frankfurt or Paris. And that fear? It's about to get way worse because the dependency isn't just historical, it's growing. How Switzerland quietly became Europe's economic hostage taker. Let's talk about what's happening right now. As of 2024, Switzerland manages approximately 25% of all global cross-border wealth. That's not European wealth, global wealth. But here's where Germany and France come in. According to Boston Consulting Group's Global Wealth Report from 2023, Swiss private banks manage roughly 890 billion euros specifically for German and French ultra-high net worth individuals. That's not corporate money. That's not government reserves. That's private citizens who've. And you know what? They're right now to trust them. France has a wealth tax that drove an estimated 60,000 millionaires out of the country between 2000 and 2020, according to New World Wealth Migration Tracking. Germany has wealth reporting requirements so aggressive that business owners literally relocate to avoid them. Where do they go? Switzerland. Always Switzerland. Let me tell you about Antoine. Antoine Rousseau, 59, sold his French tech company in 2019 for 47 million euros. Sounds like a success story, right? right? But French capital gains taxes, social charges, and wealth taxes would have taken 34% immediately, plus ongoing annual wealth taxes on what remained. His advisor ran the numbers. Keep everything in France, and in 20 years his kids would inherit about 19 million euros after taxes and inflation. Move it to Switzerland, legally through proper channels, and manage it there? His kids could inherit nearly 38 million euros. He chose Switzerland, and he told me something chilling. France didn't lose my money because of greed. They lost it because they taught me not to trust them. Switzerland never taught. Now here's where this gets dangerous for Germany and France. Since 2020, Switzerland has become a major hub for cryptocurrency custody and blockchain-based wealth management. Zurich and Zug now host over 900 blockchain companies. This is wealth storage that's even harder for Berlin and Paris to track or control. The International Monetary Fund warned in their 2023 Financial Stability Report that European capital flight into decentralized Swiss-managed crypto assets could represent a systemic sovereignty risk for EU economies. Translation: Germany and France are losing control, and they know it. What happens if Switzerland decides, tomorrow, to tighten access for German and French citizens? What if they say, we're prioritizing Asian and Middle Eastern wealth now? Berlin and Paris would panic, because they need Switzerland more than Switzerland needs them. In 2022, Swiss exports to Germany and France totaled about 67 billion euros. Sounds important, right? But German and French wealth, in Switzerland, over 890 billion euros. The dependency ratio is 13-1. Switzerland holds all the cards. But there's one more layer to this that's even darker, and it's the reason European politicians wake up sweating at night. What happens when the Swiss pull the plug? Here's the nightmare scenario that German and French central bankers have war-gamed in classified meetings. It's 2026. Global economic stress. Maybe a major recession, maybe a geopolitical crisis, maybe a currency war. Switzerland, facing pressure on multiple fronts, makes a calculated decision. They restrict foreign access to Swiss franc assets. They limit repatriation of European funds. They prioritize Swiss citizens and domestic stability. What happens next? Within 48 hours, German and French stock markets drop 12 to 18% as investors panic about locked capital. The euro slides against the dollar as confidence evaporates. Corporate credit markets freeze because nobody knows who has Swiss exposure and who doesn't. Banks start to fail. Not the big ones at first, the medium-sized ones that use Swiss liquidity as a backup. German Sparkassen, French Caisses d'Épargne. Regional banks that seemed stable until suddenly they weren't. Your savings? If they're in one of those banks, frozen. Your pension fund? If it had Swiss investments, cut by a third. Your job? If your company relied on Swiss credit lines, gone. And here's the most terrifying part. The European Central Bank can't print Swiss francs. They can print euros, sure, but that just makes the currency crisis worse. Germany and France can't force Switzerland to do anything because Switzerland isn't in the EU. They have no leverage. Let me tell you about what almost happened to Dieter. Dieter Schmidt, 71, retired from a German insurance company in 2014. His company pension was invested partially in Swiss bonds. Seemed safe, boring, reliable. In January 2015, when the franc surged, his pension fund lost 23% of its value in one day. The fund managed to recover by selling other assets at a loss, but Dieter spent 3 months not knowing if his retirement was destroyed. He told me, voice barely above a whisper, I fought in the Cold War. I lived through reunification. I survived the 2008 crisis. But I've never felt as powerless as I did watching Switzerland move and knowing my entire government couldn't protect me. Now imagine that, but permanent. Imagine Switzerland not reversing course. Imagine the dependency snapping. Germany would face the worst banking crisis since 1931. France would see capital flight that makes the 2020 wealth exodus look like a trickle. Both countries would be forced to either A. Implement capital controls, essentially admitting their economies are failing. B. Negotiate from a position of total weakness with Switzerland, accepting whatever terms Zurich demands. C. Watch their economies contract by an estimated 4 to 7% in a single year, according to stress test models from the European Systemic Risk Board. Pattern break, brutal reality check. And you know what the most insane part is? Switzerland wouldn't even do this to hurt Germany and France. They do it to protect themselves. And that's exactly why Berlin and Paris are so terrified. Because the country they depend on doesn't owe them loyalty, doesn't need their approval, and won't sacrifice Swiss interests for European solidarity. The financial lifeline running through the Alps isn't controlled by Brussels or Berlin or Paris. It's controlled by Zurich and Geneva, and it can be cut anytime. So here's where we are. Germany and France, two of the world's largest economies, have built their modern wealth on a foundation they don't control. They've spent decades trying to break Swiss banking secrecy, trying to force transparency, trying to reduce their dependency. And they've failed. Every single time. Because the truth is this. Switzerland offers something Berlin and Paris can't. Trust. Trust that your money is safe. Trust that the rules won't change overnight. Trust that political chaos won't destroy your family's future. And until Germany and France can offer that same level of trust, which, let's be honest, they never will, they're stuck, dependent on the very country they try to bully, vulnerable to the one economy they can't control. The Swiss financial lifeline isn't a privilege Germany and France enjoy. It's a leash they can't escape. So here's my question for you. Should Switzerland keep protecting European wealth and maintaining this power? Or should they pull the plug and let Germany and France face the reality of their own economic policies? Comment protect if you think Switzerland should stay the safe haven. Comment punish if you think they should cut off Germany and France and watch what happens. And if you think there's a third option nobody's talking about, drop it in the comments. Let's debate this. Because this isn't going away. The dependency is growing. And eventually, something's going to break. Make sure you're ready when it does.